From Darkness to Light, A Father's Redemption Journey, featuring Paul Summers Jr. In this episode, we sit down with Paul Summers Jr., author of Hide and Seek, A Dad's Journey from Soulless Addiction to Soul Custody. Paul shares his raw and inspiring story of battling addiction, the transformative path to recovery, and his fight to regain custody of his daughter. Join us as we delve into the depths of addiction, the challenge of the recovery process and other systems, and the profound love of a father determined to rebuild his life and family. On this episode, we are joined by Paul Summers Jr., committed to increasing understanding and connection by dismantling the stigmas towards parents afflicted with substance abuse disorder in their children. Paul has written Hide and Seek, A Dad's Journey from Soulless Addiction to Soul Custody. His experience-based knowledge offers a frightening glimpse into that which lies at the core of the overdose epidemic, the guiding thoughts within the mind of the addict alcoholic. Continuously seeking ways to give back, Paul is a certified sound healer. He creates soundscapes proven by modern neuroscience to ease and heal the damaging effects of withdrawals. One of his guitars is on display at the Punk Rock Museum in Las Vegas, Nevada. You can learn more about Paul by visiting his website at paulsummersjr.com and find more ways to connect with him.
This is Talking Addiction and Recovery, the podcast talking, you guessed it, all about addiction and recovery. Join your host, licensed professional counselor Andrew J. Schreier, as he and his guests break down recovery topics with raw honesty, delving into niche conversations around the topics of substance abuse, mental health, and gambling. We intend to meet individuals where they are on their own personal journey of recovery, with dignity, respect, and compassion. We'll do more than talk addiction and recovery. We'll explore it. We're glad you've joined us. Here with today's episode, your host, Andrew Schreier.
Welcome, Paul Summers. Thank you for joining Talking Addiction and Recovery podcast.
Thank you for having me on, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely. You wrote the book Hide and Seek, A Dad's Journey from Soulless Addiction to Soul Custody. And my first question that I want to ask is the title, Hide and Seek. I think that's a pretty relevant connection to what your story is about. But I want to know more of what was the motivation behind that, or inspiration between that being the title for your book.
That is so weird because I had a feeling you were going to ask me that. So my intuition is on fire. No. So Hide and Seek, it was somebody that edited the book. One of my early editors suggested that as a title, and it just like clicked. Yes, it can have multiple meanings. The story, in the story, there's a part where I'm away from my daughter for the longest I'd ever been away from my daughter. And we arranged this meeting where I get to see her. It has to be supervised. Excuse me. And I go into this room to be with her, and she hides from me, which was like this really odd behavior. And I turned it into this fun game because I knew my daughter was hurting by not, that time away from me was hurting her. And I think that fear led her to like hide. And so we played this game of hide and seek for a little bit until she got tired of it and came out. And the first thing she said to me was, "I see you, Daddy," which was something that her and I had shared, like this bonding moment I had shared with her, or we had shared together when I had put together like 60 days clean at one point a year prior. And it was, it spoke to me that children have this intuitive sense that we're using, and they can tell when we are and when we're clean. And she knew I was clean, and just the different person I was when I was clean. And so that was like, I was like, oh, that ties into like a chapter in the book when I get to see my daughter after I was not able to. And then it also was like hide and seek, like my daughter was hidden from me. Her mom had kidnapped her, and were taking her without letting me know where they were. And also the whole addiction, like seeking recovery, um, drug seeking behavior, like the word seek comes into a lot of place. So it just when that was suggested, I was like, oh, that's perfect, and then I added the tagline, a dad's journey from soulless addiction to soul custody as a way to just say upfront as clearly as I could, this is what this book is about.
Yeah, that was when I started reading your story and then getting into more of the book, the whole part of the custody and everything about what was going on. It was stories you don't read or hear about that often. I can't
I
tell
agree.
you how many times I've read. I've got a whole bookshelf behind there of people who wrote stories about their addiction and recovery. And this one with a father dealing with trying to have custody and all that is usually a silent story, very unheard of.
Yeah.
So I was very grateful because it reminded me way back. I've been a counselor for over 20 years. It reminded me when I started working. I worked with youth in a group home, and I remember I worked with a case where there was a child in treatment, and the dad was the only parent around, and that was so different because that was never the usual case where it was the dad, working on custody and trying to manage that. So your
Yeah.
story, you didn't allow it to stay silent, and you
Right.
share a lot about it. So I definitely want to talk more about what that was like for you because I've seen parents struggle with that where sometimes they think I'll get custody later, I'll fight for it when I'm ready, but it sounded like you were never going to let like give that up on like
No.
you were just always trying to figure out what to do to get custody back when it was lost.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm grateful that you noticed that. That it's, it was like I think Toni Morrison. I had a little magnet when I first set out to write this book. I wanted to write it well, so I started taking classes about writing. I mean, I had been a musician my entire life, and I knew how to write songs, but this was an entirely different undertaking, and so I attended seminars and webinars and writing classes and groups, and I had this thing on my fridge that said, if your story hasn't been told yet, you got to write it. And I was like, yeah, there's no, I read tons of addiction books too, or addiction recovery books, and I don't see my story. There's one or two, I think, but you have to kind of seek them out. and and I will say, the book came out in April of last year, 2024, and I will say it's not a story that finds its way into popular places easily. So I'm grateful that you acknowledge that. I don't know if it's that, the majority of book buyers are probably women, and I don't know if that's just like a story that doesn't align with them um, as much, or if it's, I know for some people, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear about, a mom that didn't step up and a dad that did. That doesn't fit a lot of narratives. I don't believe. I mean, that's what I see. That's what I'm experiencing,
And I read
you
some
know.
of those challenges you faced, like even going to court hearings and how or even in other meetings that you were attended to, how people kind of treated your situation differently because um, it didn't fit that norm or that that narrative that people are so familiar with.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
how'd you deal with that? Because that can make you feel back against the wall, that things are not on your side. It can make you feel like that's more alone. How did you deal with that whole challenging that system, that narrative, while just trying to gain custody of your daughter?
I there a few different things come to mind. I mean, probably the first thing is like my daughter and I were close, and her mom, ended or tried to sever that bond. And I hear the parental alienation stories, and it's like, okay, that didn't happen to me, and I feel so bad for either a male or a female parent, a dad or a mom that happens to. That's ridiculous. Using a kid as a ball, like this is mine. I'm playing keep away or hide and seek even. That's there's another tie-in. So one thing that I knew is I didn't want that. I wasn't going to let go of my bond with my child. Another thing, uh, I mean, I was almost 40 when I had my daughter. So this was, having a child was something I really wanted. And not saying that there's dads or moms out there that don't want their children, but it's in the action. It's always in the action. You could say, like, I have two stepkids, and like their dad's like, "Oh, I love my kid." He posts on social, "I miss my kids," but he doesn't come see. He doesn't come. I mean, they're grown now, but he didn't come see him. So I didn't want to be that guy, first of all, Second of all, uh, the life I led as a musician, I don't know if that has everything to do with it, but a lot of the women that I had relationships were ones where their dad wasn't in their life. And I truly felt like there was a wall for them as far as how much they were able to trust and let go with love with a man. And I didn't want my daughter to live that pain, that sort of like emptiness, that God-sized hole as we talk about in recovery, like I didn't want her to have that. So that was another reason. Like I really need to be a part of her life for her psyche, for her well-being. And uh, I got clean. I mean, I got clean. And so I was becoming this new man. I was doing, I got clean with the help of a 12-step program and just doing that work on being a better person, being a better human, being accountable. I'm accountable to my kid, so I have to show up for her because if I don't, I know her mom's still using, like something bad's going to happen eventually. And that was what happened. And so, I mean, if nobody's going to advocate for my daughter, if I don't advocate for my daughter, who will? So that was a big push for me, like to just deal with the no's, the doors being slammed, the ridicule, the judge laughing at me, the time and
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. And I think part of it comes to mind too that this was also a time where you were in recovery, you weren't using substances. And I think part of the talking points or the things we tell people is, hey, go to a meeting, go to treatment, get sober, and everything will be better and everything will be okay. But I mean, even as you were working through your recovery, it didn't mean everything then just like gets handed to you or everything all of a sudden was resolved. You had to face a lot of challenges, um, and now you weren't doing the numbing, escaping, and avoiding. So,
Right.
and I saw some of the your writing, which I thought was really insightful when you would really share with readers the exact thoughts going through your mind.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes, it was that raw, like, this isn't, you know, this sucks, or this isn't fair, or I would like to go do this. Like I thought your style of writing really did a great job of capturing the thoughts that we can struggle with, even when we know this is the right thing to do. Sometimes my mind wants to go here, or sometimes I'm being pulled over here. I felt it was really raw as I read. I was like, it's like inside this mind here that I'm getting a glimpse into.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm great that grateful. I'm grateful you acknowledged that and noticed that that was a piece of me wanting to write a recovery story that wasn't just like the mess and the message. Like I want this book to help, especially a single dad out there who's giving up. Of course, I want, uh, or mom even, that's like, oh, I don't know, my kid's probably okay with so and so or whatever. I mean, I see the damage that my daughter not having her mom in her life has done. And it's like, no, don't ever give up on your kids. Like, there's, you know, so making it through addiction but the other reason I wanted to write this story was for somebody that's not an addict, that's loving or living with, or is really close with someone that's tripping themselves up with addiction and our patterns of justification, denial, the things that we addicts go through. I wanted them to see into an addict's mind because when you love someone that's an addict, like you're too close to like to see that they're lying to you, but they're really just lying to themselves, that their words and their actions are two way different things, that they have best intentions and end up falling short. So I wanted a non-addict, or a person who loves somebody that's an alcoholic or an addict to be able to like, oh, here's a guidepost. Oh, well, this person kept telling me they would be here, they'd show up, and they didn't. And man, they really sold it that they were going to be there and they wanted to be there. And, what's the deal? And it's like multiple layers of addiction, the disease and, uh, the just the pain that's caused without even trying to, and I don't know, because I'm on both sides of it. I've been that person inflicting the pain, and I've been that person inflicted by the pain, so
And I think you did a good job of, it was amazing to hear how your relationships with certain people changed and developed from the start of the book to the end, because you had so many other people that were involved in taking care of your daughter, and part of
yeah.
it was they're trying to keep her away versus protecting her or doing what's right, versus what they've heard from this person, heard from there. I felt like you did describe a lot too of what they go through. And like I said, it was really great to hear how some of those relationships, they were challenged, they were tough, but there were a lot of points where you recognized where other people were coming from, or what other people were trying to do. Where I think you had that compassion, even when sometimes you didn't agree with something, or where you thought there might have been some injustice. So I felt like it was your story. It was a part of your daughter's story, but also a lot of the other people who were also in her life.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I mean, I just got chills that you were that you read into that, and probably the biggest case in point was my daughter's maternal grandma. So, my daughter's mom's mom and dad, and I mean, they hated me when this all first happened, um, and and understandably, and it's I was just thinking back how like I used to be such a vindictive person, like I mean I still every day deal with like I don't trust. And my go-to is to, snap back when I think I'm being snapped at. And there's times like I'm realizing I'm not even being snapped at, but I'm snapping back. And I had to just say none of that behavior is going to work for me. What's the other option? And the other option was be to put myself in their shoes. And it was it was so not like me to have ever been like that in my life. And it really is amazing that when when I don't want to just limit this to recovery. It's like when we commit to changing, it doesn't just like magically happen. It's like you have to create those moments that the next time it happens, you're like, well, I made it through that one moment, So it's like, let me forgive the things that the grandma said. They were wrong, and but let me let go of that and not make it about me. I want my daughter in my life, and I want my daughter to have her grandma in her life. So uh, let me
And I
just
and
focus.
I've read and I've read moments in your book like that, because there were parts where I was like, oh, here we go again. Is this going to be a repeat of what he described doing earlier? And then there are moments where you would reflect that, or stop yourself and be like, whether it's no, I can't do this because you were now thinking more of the consequences, or because you realize like this is what happened last time and I don't want that to happen again. Like there were a lot of moments in the book where there could have been uh, the same repeated decisions that you made in the past, but in a lot of times where you were able to think differently, act differently, reflect on how you did it before and what you were doing now. I felt like there were a lot of times where we could have seen it go back to the same pattern, but in your journey and in your book, we saw the other ways out, or the different roads you can take.
Yeah.
In it.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't think I intended on that, but now that I look at it, there was a meeting I went to, and I was right about to be taking my first year, so the book covers my first year in recovery, and somebody had just relapsed right after their first year birthday. And I was like, that was what, my thoughts were already there. I was thinking, a year, I got this, and so that is a recurring theme in the book, is like, here's the option to be how you used to be, or behind the curtain that Carol Merrill is now standing. Oh, and so let's make a deal reference, old
Yeah.
school show, but yeah, and that's the thing, is like, we have choices, and I think when we're in our addiction, or when we have, the disease of addiction, and I'm not totally sure that you think of it that way, or that the listeners do, and I'm just speaking the language that I'm familiar with, it's like we lie to ourselves, and tell ourselves, well, no, it's okay if the sayings, we tell ourselves that we can do that behavior again. This time it'll be different. And yes, that's the definition of insanity, and you run those little mottos through your head over and over. I heard on one of your other podcasts, you were talking about play the tape. You play the tape. What happens if I tell grandma to take a hike? Well, then I lose family. And do I want to be a selfish dad that's all about, or parent that, this is my kid, this is my ball, I'm going to play keep away with her, then I win. Like, I'm going to ruin my daughter's connection to her family. So no, I'm not going to do that.
Mm. Yeah. And I thought I forgot the scene in the book where you were going to the house because you wanted to like get her back, knowing like it could have, if there was um there was the custody going on where you could have gotten into a lot of trouble. And what I remember in it is I thought you really did a good job of, when people are like, well, I don't get how someone thinks that way, or how they don't think about this. And I thought your book at times, especially earlier on, gave a really good insight into like how, yes, this could be the right thing, or I know this isn't, but like my mind or my heart is pulling me into this other direction or decision. That kind of showed that battle between like what our mind is saying, or we may have like an urge to do, versus like what we know might be, yeah, this isn't the right thing to do. But, and I felt like there were a lot of times when you were able to describe two, because you would stop in some of you'd be talking about a certain thing going on, then you'd kind of reflect on it and share with the audience kind of like what was going on behind that. And I thought you did a really good job of explaining and kind of articulating to people that inner dialogue that goes on in our minds, that battle that can happen. And I felt they did a really good job of giving people an understanding who may not be able to relate to that, or to them, they're like, oh, it's real simple. You just don't do this. And then part of it's like, it sounds that way, but then when you can imagine this all going on, you can see why, some people make the choices they do.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate that insight. I I also, well, and hopefully this helps your listeners, depending on where they are at in talking addiction here. Like I was paying attention to what my sponsor at the time called the neon signs. What are the neon signs? The right? And uh and just so your listeners know, you're referring to a part in the story where I took it on myself. I was going to kidnap my daughter back, and I went through all the motions to do that. And uh, and I won't give any more away. Uh, but I found myself in the house. I had broken into a house, and I was ready to just swoop her up, and but what was going to happen next? And one thing that got in my head at that moment, and I'm talking about the neon signs now, is the reflection. So I have a friend who I played music with, and his wife was abducted by both of her parents when she was a little girl.
Mm.
So one, like her and her sister, were stolen away, kidnapped, brought to a different state, went under aliases, and then the police caught up to them, and then the other parent did the same thing and hid the kids, and she's, therapy for her whole life over these decisions these parents made, and that was one of those moments that filters in and like, well, you can make it all about you and just self-will, let's go, charge. And fortunately, I could do it, and I was able to reflect, as you said, in that moment and play the tape through. That's another way of looking at it. But I put those pieces in the story as a way of saying, there is hope. Like we're not destined to be, this brokenness is not. It doesn't have to be our final, this is the curtain, man. I'm 26 years old. I'm using every day. It's over. And that's not true. That's not the truth. That's another manufactured lie, so.
Yeah. How has life changed, since, man, this could be a lot with, like, you think about not necessarily just how it's changed with sobriety, but also I imagine what you went through to gain custody of your daughter and through all that. Um, because I think it's just not one thing or the other. This is your whole journey, which is
Yeah.
several things to deal with. It's not just about one part of it. There was a lot. So when you look back at, like, when you wrote this and during that time, what are some big, takeaways as far as what this all has taught you, or even continue to learn from it? Because this is usually what we say, a lifelong journey, not just it's over now. So anything that really stands out as to where you are today, and things taking back from your story and everything that you wrote about, that were some big things that have changed for you?
Oh man. No. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to encapsulate it totally. I mean, so currently, I mean, my clean date is June 26, 2007. So I'm at over 17 and a half years clean and sober. Um, I raised my daughter by myself for 11 years. And then through a friend of hers that she met at camp, um, I met my wife now. So I've been remarried. I have two stepkids, and so we've been married 8 years now. So the kids are all grown. Like my daughter Lola, that's in the book, she's now a mom. So I'm a grandpa, Her husband is in recovery. So, I mean, I really believe like taking my daughter to like meetings and her kind of experiencing my recovery with me. I think that's led her to have an understanding of addiction and relationships. Um, my wife is very much into Al-Anon. Like she lost her dad to alcoholic dementia. And so, these things that continue, these continuums. Um, as I mentioned earlier, like I had been a professional musician for many years, uh, and as my addiction took over, that that became less and less a part of my life. And then I had a kid, so I was already pretty steeped into daily use when my daughter was born, and then I got clean right around when she was 4 years old. Um, so reason I mentioned that is that I had at that point being a sole custodial father, like I have to work, I have to make a living. Not going to be playing music in bars. That's not going to be healthy for me or her. And so got a job, a day job. And now that the kids are gone, I've always been a creative person. It's always been in my blood. I wrote the book as my desire was to give back to people who are dealing with addiction, either on the side of it as a person that, has kids and isn't sure if they can quit, or on the side of somebody who loves somebody that has addiction. And the whole book writing process was about 4 years. So, now it's out. Now that thing is done, but no, I'm not done. I have purpose. I want to have purpose. What is life without purpose? Why do you do what you do? Right? And I came across, well, I started praying, and I mean the whole book came out of prayer. Like I said, have been in two different 12-step programs, and you share at meetings, you sponsor people, that's great. But this story it's not in the culture, the story of a dad getting clean, raising his kid by himself. That's not really a cultural norm. And so, okay, the book's got to be written, lots of prayer. Okay, that's what we're doing. I believe this is, God's will, not my own. Um, and then I started, okay, the book's out. Now what do I do? And I wanted to do something with music because that I believe was my original gift that I, you know, allowed to be tainted by my addictive personality. And somebody called me out of the blue after I was praying, and they said, "Hey, I'm opening a treatment center in Nashville. Do you think you could put together, like, this was her words, you're the best musician I know. Do you think you can put together a music program?" And I
Wow.
was, wow, what an honor. Like to give back to, because Nashville's full of musicians. And so I started working on that. I started working out, okay, I could do this, I could do that, I could do this whole like, program. And so I started researching it. And as I was doing research, I came across uh, sound healing. And I got certified as a sound healer. And
Incredible.
I found that 520 hertz solfeggio frequencies have been proven by neuroscience to help not only the human body sort of purify it, but it helps anxiety of withdrawals. And it's like, this is proven. Holy crap. I always knew, playing music, like music saved my soul, basically. I'd be dead without it. The times that, listening to music just put me in a better headspace. And I just went, wow, okay, how can I create this music? And so I started working on these things. I call them songscapes. And now I do sound healing. That's what I do now. So all of this brought me to here. Here's where I am now. And like recently I did I think called Camp Soberfest. I don't know if you've heard of it. They do it once a year. It's in the Sequoias. So I did this sound healing, 100 alcoholics in recovery or close to being in recovery, laying out on a next to a lake in the Sequoia, in the Sequoia, the Sierra Nevadas, looking up at the stars. And I mean, people were so moved by that. And it's like, this is it. This is where I'm going. I don't know how I'll afford it, but I'm doing it. My wife's very supportive, and yeah, I mean, I'm just doing it for the community now and looking at traveling the country, going town to town and uh doing doing sound healing, the specialized sound healings.
It's amazing. I've
And
always thought
and I
music
want,
was not music is something that everyone can relate to, and there's a lot of connection between, even artists, people who've well known, who've had struggles with substance use and in recovery. Um, I always thought there was some missing connection, that we're not using that enough. Even people just sharing songs that have meant something to them, or a song that they may have listened to that helped them get out of something,
yeah, yeah,
really tough or challenging. Um, so it was, and to be honest, I learned most about that when I worked in settings that were like residential,
yeah,
where people like lived, because outside of like group and sessions and other things, like people would be like listening to music, or they would be working out to music, or they'd be listening to music while maybe reading, or doing some writing or something, or just like people hanging out. And those are moments where you could kind of get an understanding for just how music connects to that individual. So it's cool to hear that you even took it a step further with your whole journey, and really applying it in that sense, because I think more of that is needed.
yeah. And I mean, it's I don't know, cathartic. I mean, it's healing. Like, it's when someone attends one of my sound healing sessions, I mean, it's a focused like relaxation, and it's sort of like a decompressing from everything. And so it has that like rejuvenating quality to it. And yeah, I mean, I'm looking at, I mean, I'll say it, like, my goal right now is to like travel the country doing this. Just, I, I mean, if you're listening to this podcast and you work at a treatment center or a wellness studio, contact me through the ways to do it. I'm taking this everywhere I can. Um, the other thing, like, about the book is, I kind of came up with to a wall as far as, um, it's hard for me to, like, I'm not a salesperson. And also in, addiction, like, I was raised, or like, my addiction values, that were infused into me was, attraction rather than promotion. Like, so it's hard for me to like, buy this book. Come on, all you recovery people. So I don't know if I've even, opened that market up uh, uh, to, I don't know, warm up to the book itself. It's not, I didn't want to do it that way in the first place. So I'm very comfortable with organic word of mouth community, meeting people one on one, doing these things that are more intimate, instead of like, we're gonna have this like, yeah, hide and seek, you know.
Yeah,
um I don't know. But it's all art. It's all art. It's art. It's artisticness. It's creativity. And it's works that are aimed, for me, it's just aimed at helping others.
it's great. How what has been some feedback from readers and others have
Mm.
you gotten about, what they said to you about your book, or what have they asked you What sort of things stand out as far as what some people who've read it and talked to you about it, what have they shared?
Two things come to mind right away. First thing is a few people that have shared that they have kids that are addicts or
Mhm.
that are in addiction or alcoholism, and they can't understand them at all. They don't understand it, and this book helped them understand. So, uh, in keeping with what you were saying earlier about there's it's written to expose the thoughts going on inside the 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 person afflicted's head, and the other thing that comes to mind, a lot of people ask is where's my daughter's mom now? And uh, how does my daughter feel about everything? And that's not an easy one to answer. My daughter's mom never really put some clean time together. I know she tried. Um, uh, how my daughter feels about her, I don't have clarity on that. That's that's something that I don't think she's come to terms with yet. They saw each other around Christmas this year, which was great. Like that's a blessing. Um, and so I've always wanted to enhance their relationship, but I've always been hands off. I can't make something happen. I can't fix anything. And I definitely want to just make a statement that um, like her, my daughter's mom, who was my wife at the time, um, did the very best thing probably that almost anyone's done for me, and that was to leave and snap me out of my addiction, really. Like I've never come at her as someone to be an adversary of, or um, I've been angry that it's hurt my daughter, that her absence has hurt my daughter. I've been angry about that for sure, but I've never taken it out on her. I've always had a lot of compassion. If I can't love another addict and I don't love myself, it's like I understand, because I'm an addict. I'm an addict, and these are the behaviors that I'll follow if I go back to using. And so I just, there was a lot of forgiveness in that, and so I've never thought anything but highly of her for making that move, because it saved my life. I'd clearly be dead if I kept using. I wanted to die. I was at that point where I was completely broken and I didn't see a way out. I did not see a way out. And I believe part of why she left and took our daughter was because I had a conversation with her about like, I need you to like go ahead and raise her. I think I can't quit. So I'm probably going to die soon. I don't want to kill myself. That was never in the plan. But I figured my addiction would take me out sooner or later because that's where I was. So
Yeah, it's a great question that I think comes up a lot. And whether it's now and or how as your daughter continue to age, but also during the time that there is a question of how much do we share with the child, you know, and how much do we share as they get older. Because I've worked with youth for a long
yeah,
time. I've also worked with parents as well. And the one thing that I always stood out to me was like children will know more than you think, but they'll never know the full story. So they might not know that the parent's using a substance, but they might be like, the parent, they don't seem well. They seem
yeah,
ill, or they seem not like themselves. So I always say like they know a lot more than we think, but do they know the whole story? Um, no, but as they age, that becomes just an ongoing topic of sometimes like what do they learn about it? What do they remember about things growing
yeah,
up? And what I try and tell parents is that it's just never like a one time like I don't think you can hope for this one-time conversation that like settles everything. That like
Oh,
all of a sudden, like, all right,
right.
we're gonna have this talk today, and I'm gonna tell
Yeah.
you all about this, and then it sort of like wraps everything up. But it's gonna be an ongoing conversation, a dialogue. You know, as they get older, they might realize things or have more questions. They don't remember stuff that they question now more, or they might wonder about because they didn't think about it. It's just I think sometimes people are looking or hoping for a script that if I broke down these
Yeah.
details that I can share, avoid these ones that I shouldn't. If I have it here, it can sort of take care of all of that. But you know, it just doesn't work that way. I mean,
Yeah. That,
even in conversations you'll have still, um,
yeah.
it just doesn't have that ending. It's usually an ongoing dialogue of how things were and then how things are now. I mean, it's a lot different than how that conversation may have been years ago.
Right. Yeah. And I've had those conversations hoping for that outcome, and it's a little frustrating on the parent side because you know, you want to fix what you can see is broken or you think you can see is broken. And I did finally just like, I don't know what's broken. I don't know if it's broken. She might be totally good. And I'm, putting these, oh, but did that hurt you when, I might be instilling these things. And I did eventually, I mean, I brought my daughter to therapy a few times and she just, nah, don't want that, nothing to do with it. And it's like, okay, I'm backing off then. You know, it's it's um it's definitely something that, you know, like I can use hope and turn it into self-will and then ruin something, and make it hopeless. So it's definitely as a parent, it's like learning to back off, like just you can, I've had talks about what had happened, how things went down, and um it's like I finally came to like when she wants to know, she'll ask me, you know.
Yeah, yeah, it's great, and part of me dives into that family systems that I've been through with counseling and how I think one thing that I was reading, to be honest, one thing I was reading with your story was I was almost like, like I was thinking in my mind, like, what would it be like if, his child's mother was writing a story too?
Yeah,
Same time period. What would the daughter, what would her story be? What would the in-laws story? Like I really
yeah, yeah,
thought of how this would be written by like five or six people going through some of these in the same spaces, in the same, you know, events, and how
yeah,
it would be talked about and reported. But that's because this is, like I said when we started this wasn't just your story. This is involved your daughter. This involved other people
yeah,
um, in it, and I thought you did a really good job of, to the best that you could. Even when you talked about her mom just before in this talk of, I thought you were doing the best you could with compassion, respect, understanding where they were coming from, even if someone was trying the best they could with what they had. But also, it wasn't as easy to see that when it was going on.
right.
It took a lot for you to get to that point where you could say that and see that. And your story is just filled with um, a lot of the potential perspectives of who is all involved in this.
Yeah,
There's quite a bit of people.
yeah. I I think we should do that. Like just get outside of ourselves. There's different perspectives. I mean, I would read that story of what my daughter's mom went through, and it wouldn't sound like mine at all. I mean, I have no idea. Certain things like how did she see when that happened? How did what was her feelings when that happened? And same with the grandparents and yeah. I mean, I in the beginning of the book, the very beginning, I think I wrote something along the lines of, this is what I recall to the best of my ability. And like there was a the very first day, and I realized at that point, like I hadn't even got clean yet. I went over to the grandparents' house and I accused them of kidnapping my daughter.
Remember that.
And and I didn't remember that happening. My my daughter's grandma reminded me later that that's what happened. I was like, I don't remember that. And so, stories get our perception gets skewed a little bit. Yeah, and then fielding, those moments when your kid's hurting, I mean, I can remember like 10, 11, 12 years old, walking in my daughter's room in the morning to get her ready for school, and she's sobbing and like, I miss mommy. And it's like, I can't do anything about that, and like I would just say, yeah, I miss her too, or, come here and let me hold you. What, what can be done? It's a lot. It's definitely a lot.
Yeah. So as we wrap up here, either things that you kind of share what you've been doing and working on, anything that you'd want to give as a final insight or lesson or takeaway for readers who've never heard of your book, people who may have read your book, but just for the audience in general that you want to leave them with?
Probably the main thing that I would like to leave anyone listening, or your listeners, your audience with is, uh, it's never too late to get clean, to get help, to it's not over. It's not over. It is not over. Um, I was 44 when I got clean. So, and my life has gotten, it's become the life that I never imagined, kind of thing. And so I want, I want people to know that it's possible. And also, uh, because you touched on this, it's like, keep your mind open to other people's perspective. You know, that's it. It's harder to do than it sounds. Uh, I think one way that I learned this was through my wife and I doing therapy, and what she always what our therapist suggested that we do is anytime that we talk to somebody, have a conversation, especially if it's heated or is repeat back to them what I heard you say was, and where we started when we started doing that was like we weren't even actually listening. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like I would repeat back to her something I thought she said, like, this is what I heard you say. And she's like, that isn't, and vice versa. Like, man, you're like, the toxicity comes out in our perception. We're perceiving that we know what somebody's intentions are or what they're feeling. And when we get that moment to have that dialogue and say, okay, what I heard you say was this, and then they can correct you. You got to be open to the correction, though.
That's the couples marriage work where, facing each other, look at like eye contact,
Yeah.
say it to the other person. Don't say it, to me as the therapist. So I resonate a lot with some of that work in helping to get back to some of those listening, hearing the other person, having the eye contact and being able to sit there with someone. So I really do appreciate your special recognition of that needing to look at different perspectives. Cause I don't know where you'd be if you never took that chance or that leap to look at, well, this other person, I think this is what they're doing or their intent, but I could be, completely missing
Well,
something.
it's sort of inherent in the story that I'm telling, though, is like our culture doesn't see men as parents in a lot of cases. and it's like this narrative needs to change. Like men love their kids as much as women do. Men can nurture their kids as much as a woman can. And I wanted to avoid all the conflict of, you know, I mean, the battle of the sexes, basically. I wanted to avoid all that and get us to branch these things. But, a big reason for the book being written is, well, we have to have that narrative, because this is changing. Our society's changing as more women are the breadwinners, and the person that's gone to work every day. Well, where's the kids? Maybe the dads can step up now. The census figures are showing this every 10 years it's been doubling how many single parent homes are dads. Dad run, single solo custodial parents are dads. So it's happening. It's not like anything close to 50-50. It's more like 80-20 at this point, I believe. But that was a big part of, like, I have to get involved in this narrative, but not embrace the conflict, because it's easy to, there's plenty of it out there. And believe me, I got just demolished on social media right around 2019 through 2021, just like, wow, people aren't ready to hear this yet, but got to do it. Got to be said. We got to keep moving and progressing, and that requires us to hear each other. Definitely.
That's great. Thanks for joining, Paul, and sharing your book. It was definitely one that stood out, and for all the reasons that we talked about. So I think there's a lot of value to listeners to get from your book. So I really do want to thank you. The book is Hide and Seek: A Dad's Journey from Soulless Addiction to Soul Custody, and we will have links in the podcast notes where people can find the book and connect with you. But once again, I really want to thank you for taking the time to join and talk with us on the podcast.
And Andrew, thank you so much for your podcast and for delving into this book to be able to discuss what it's about with everyone, with your listeners. I really appreciate what you're doing for the addiction community. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining. And listeners will definitely take a lot of value out of your book and our conversation.
You've been listening to Talking Addiction and Recovery with Andrew J. Schreier. We're so glad you've joined us and invite you to connect further with the show and these topics at www.andrewjschreier.com. That's AndrewJSCHREIER.com. You can also email us directly at talkingaddictionandrecovery@gmail.com and connect on social media, Instagram at Talking Addiction and Recovery, Facebook Talking Addiction and Recovery Podcast, and Twitter at TalkAR_podcast. To stay connected and never miss an episode, be sure to like, rate, and subscribe. Until next time, friends, let's keep talking addiction and recovery.